So, Claire, thanks a million for coming on. I want to hit you with pretty much a question. So in chapter 2 of your book, which is Amazing Lessons from a Cult Survivor, I highly recommend it. We'll be talking a lot about this today. But in that chapter 2, you say, yeah, you pretty much pose it where a lot of people ask, how do you end up in a cult? So I suppose from what I get from your kind of book, it's not like this sudden decision. It's like this gradual change. But yeah, what's your answer to that?
It's very interesting that you asked that question, because what annoys me is that people, people sit in front of the TV and they will watch a Netflix series like Keep Sweet, Pray and Obey, or some other series that comes from, that's got a cult. Although we don't call them cults now, we call them new religious movements. That's more the academic term. Although, slight tangent, they're not really new, because you've cherry-picked a whole heap of different things from different religions that you like and you're just putting it together. But they call them new religious movements. So, but the thing is that with my particular case, it wasn't both the groups that I was in were basically what you call a sect, because they were a breakaway from the Catholic Church. So they're still kind of attached, but not quite. So I'm just making sure. Can you hear me? Just so to make sure.
Yeah, you dropped out there for a sec.
Oh, right. Yeah. So the two groups that I was in were more sectarian. So they were still based on Catholicism, but they just, like with the Society of St. Pius X, they had veered off like backwards. And then with William Cam, the little pebble, he had sort of like encompassed this whole end of world prophecy. And so, he based it on Catholicism in an effort to have it more accepted. But the thing is, like, this is very interesting, your question, because I'll take, with both, firstly, with the Society of St. Pius X, like Archbishop Lefebvre, actually, he had good intentions.
Yeah.
He had good intentions. He did argue quite a few points with the Second Vatican Council that he didn't like. And then he started he started saying that, well, not that he started it, but he sort of pushed more of an agenda with saying the Tridentine Mass, and then he set up.
Just sorry, Claire, just for the listeners that won't be like aware maybe of what the Society of St. Pius is, or the Tridentine Mass. Like, what is that then? Like, what's the kind of I suppose underpinnings?
So what happened was, like, I'm sure there'll be quite a few people, but especially the Irish will be familiar with the new Vatican II from 1962 to 1965. And that was to bring a breath of fresh air into the Catholic Church. But in bringing that breath of fresh air, they brought in the Mass in the vernacular. So wherever you were, you have Mass in Italian, Mass in English, Mass in German, whatever country you were in. Now, there were some clerics that didn't like that. They wanted to keep it to be the way they believed that it should be, as being the Mass of Pope Pius V or Pope Pius X, because they like, specifically with Archbishop Lefebvre, he latched on to Pope Pius X because Pope Pius X wrote an encyclical. I can't remember the Latin name for it, but it was basically speaking against modernism. And so it was like the more changes that came in over the years, and when I say over the years, this is going from 1965 like onwards, 1988 onwards, like the more that the Catholic Church brought in, the more Archbishop Lefebvre pushed back against it and kind of went backwards in a way, like further backwards. And it created a huge rift, whereas in 1988, he consecrated those 4 bishops specifically against Pope John Paul's instructions, and he incurred an excommunication for everybody. So the thing was that if I'm speaking about traditionalism and I'm speaking about that group, when the changes of the Catholic Church came in,
Mm.
There were people who didn't like the changes, and that is completely natural. You're going to find that it's just like when you have updates on your laptop. You're thinking,
Yeah.
oh God, do they have to? Because now they've changed everything. Instead of me clicking on the right, now I have to click on the left. Like,
Yeah.
we're creatures of habit. And so there was a certain amount of people, and it wasn't large numbers, but they were quite loud, where they didn't like the changes and they preferred the mass said in Latin. And so they stuck to tradition, and that's how they, like they liked that. And so they stayed with the familiar and the comfortable, and that's how they stayed in that group. And then when Archbishop Lefebvre consecrated those four priests, bishops, like they were already hard and fast traditionalists, and they were going to stick with him no matter what.
Okay.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So you can't just go in there and go, hello, can't you see that he's not doing what Pope John Paul II asked him not to do? And it's like, oh, well, we can, but, and then they list all the reasons. Now, with the little pebble, William Cam,
Yeah. That was a
now
different kettle of fish.
it was a different kettle of fish, but see, he did a similar thing, because
Okay.
at that time, the Diocese of Wollongong was the most multicultural diocese in Australia. And there's a lot of Europeans there. And therefore, there's a lot of Marian devotion.
Mm.
Now, part of the Second Vatican Council, part of the changes were that they threw out quite a few of the Marian feasts, the Marian novenas, all that sort of thing, novenas, feasts, pilgrimages, all of that sort of thing. But then these Europeans they're very strong in devotion towards the Virgin Mary.
Yeah.
And so what William Cam started doing was, there's been, not very many people say the rosary anymore. Let's have a rosary group. And that sounds innocent enough, doesn't it? We'll
Yeah.
have a rosary. We'll just say a rosary. Okay, cool. We'll have a rosary group. Oh, there's a special feast of Our Lady coming up. I mean, when is there not? But let's have a novena. Let's have something special. Nothing out of the ordinary. Completely normal. So he managed to gather these people that were disenchanted with the Second Vatican Council into his group. And then he started with, and see, the thing is with traditional people, they believe in Our Lady of Fatima, they believe in Our Lady of Garabandal. And then, of course, with Our Lady of Fatima, she predicted that, if not enough prayers were said, not enough sacrifices, well, then the world was going to eventually move further and further into sin.
Yeah.
Now, anyone with a blind eye can see that the world hasn't gotten better, it's gotten worse, if you want to put it that way. And so that fed straight into his narrative, and of course the people believed him because it's true.
Yeah.
But then he started bringing in, oh, I'm having some locutions, like Our Lady is speaking to me. She's mentioned how much she loves this group. I mean, you want to be loved, don't you?
Yeah.
You see what I mean? And then that's how it slowly added more. And that's why when people are watching the TV and they go, I would never join a group like that, you can't say that, because everybody at some point in their lives has some vulnerable times. And when you're vulnerable, what do? You're looking for answers. You will go seeking those answers, and you will latch on to anybody that gives you those answers because you're vulnerable. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But it's just that you have these people in the world that can really manipulate in not a good way, like people, others who are in a vulnerable state, rather than actually saying, well, look, I can listen to you. I don't have the answers for you, but maybe you should go here or go there, or maybe go to a counselor or a therapist. Or have you thought about this? They offer all the answers. And so therefore, people latch on.
Yeah, and I even get like definitely when you went like the Order of Chappelle, which was William Cam's cult. Like what I get from the book though is you were kind of an unwilling participant nearly. It wasn't like you were going there searching for meaning. It was more your kind of husband was bringing you along on the journey. And one of the most shocking moments in the book actually for me was uh, when your husband almost had said that he wanted to go to the almost to Cam's like compound or where he had like all the trailers because he didn't want to have the responsibility of rearing the kids almost. He wanted other men to do it. Now that nearly floored me, but like that's a wild thing to say. Like, and then for you
Mm-hmm.
to have to deal with, like, how where was your head at? Like, you must have been like, no, I need to get out of here. This isn't, the alarm bells ringing.
Well, yeah. See, the thing was, it was very much a juxtaposition in terms of like I was brought up to
Yeah.
be very submissive. I was subjugated. You sacrifice yourself for your husband. You follow him wherever he goes because if you make the husband happy, well, then your life will go well. Generally
Mm.
speaking, I mean that's what we're taught. But the thing is that it's as my therapist calls it, which I love, it's conditioned suppression.
Okay.
And I love that because when I think about it, it is very much a conditioned suppression. It's a suppression of our identity, suppression of our voice, it's suppression of creativity, it's suppression of sexuality, suppression of opinion, suppression of education. And for me, it was like I did want to leave. But the thing was that I was also afraid of leaving because I had no money. I had no access to any resources. I didn't know anybody there. I didn't trust anybody in the group. I could
Mm.
see almost straight away that they were backstabbers. Um, and then I thought, well, if I sacrifice what I want for a few years, Tony will see that this is not going to work out, and then we'll move out and you know move on. But as we lived there longer, I noticed that he distanced himself even more, like physically and emotionally. When he told me that about, he expected other men to look after the children, I was just like in my head, I'm just like, what the hell? Like, what am I like? It was so difficult for me, honestly. It was very difficult for me, and but it reached a point when William Cam was having that priest Malcolm Broussard
Yeah.
um, when he was ordaining and consecrating married men as priests, and I'm like, I know Tony. I live with him. I know his faults. I know that he's like he was like I didn't have the words for it back then, but he was coercively controlling. He
Yeah.
was emotionally abusive. He was financially abusive. And I thought, so you treat us like this, but then you want to act all holy and go in and hear people's confessions and say mass?
Yeah.
Hell no, that's not happening over my dead body.
Yeah. That's wild. Especially
You
when
know,
you know. So like that's just the scales are almost coming off the eyes, so to speak. One of the other like and this is the other thing that really fascinated me because obviously it was like a doomsday cult or kind of sect. Like, so much of
mm.
it was based on Cam's predictions and stuff like that.
Oh,
Like
absolutely.
I'm probably gonna say the name wrong. Is it the Halley-Bopp comet?
No, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, Halley-Bopp.
yeah,
But okay, so
yeah.
we had the prediction around the Halley-Bopp comet going to come. Then it was Y2K. Then it was World War Three with after 9/11. But like when they like, because you have such inside knowledge there of the kind of mores and the kind of psychological kind of makeup of everyone. But when these predictions stop coming true, is no one like here that was a lie or like that was how do we keep believing someone when the predictions aren't
Because
real?
they've already remember they're already there and they've already got a lot at stake. And
Mm.
it's just and with William, it was just about like with the Y2K. Like I remember being absolutely so anxious because I went to bed that night. I was pregnant with my sixth child, and so I didn't stay up praying all night. So I went to bed, and I was fully expecting the next day. to like literally see the world decimated outside.
Wow.
And I remember waking up and just like lying there with my eyes closed and just thinking, okay, it's silent. I don't hear anything. And then I sort of opened up one eye and I'm thinking, okay, the sun is up. So I guess that's a good sign. And then, I went and I opened up the blind and it's like, well, everything kind of looks normal so far. Like nothing's kind of happened. And then, as nothing happened, people did ask the questions because that was supposed to be the big thing. That was supposed to be it.
Yeah.
But then people were asking, and then, of course, William he was really very much of a chameleon and a manipulator. And he was just like, yes, I'm just as confused as you are, but I'm just God's prophet and I'm just giving the dates like he said. But then, and then later on it was like, oh, the Virgin Mary's come to me. Like, our dates are not heaven's dates. Like when they said the new year, they don't necessarily mean like the new year that we understand it. Could be another new year. It could be, or otherwise it was like, oh, well, there was enough prayers and sacrifices done by the faithful to hold it back for a little bit longer, but we don't know how long little bit longer is.
Yeah.
Could be today, could be tomorrow, could be next week, it could be 6 months.
So it's gaslighting, pretty much.
Yeah.
A lot of gaslighting. And come here, do you think that William Cam, did he actually believe like this? Like, was this the thing I'm always fascinated with? I had another guest on there a couple of weeks back that was in the family, that cult. I think it was around Melbourne as well, but and that was Anne Hamilton Byrne.
Yeah, and
But I was wondering, did she really believe she was the reincarnation of Jesus? But did William Cam, did he believe this, or was it just a mechanism to control people and rally power? Or did he actually believe he was getting these predictions? Like, what's your opinion on that?
I think it's a bit of both. I think he's extremely narcissistic.
Okay.
Because he has never ever admitted to any of the crimes he committed. I know he committed them. Like, there's a lot in my book that I couldn't put in there because
I can imagine
he'd love to sue me. I mean, but what I would say is the truth. But the thing is that I know so much more than what I could put in the book, and I know he did it. And he has never once admitted it, and he always acts so shocked, like, oh, like when somebody talks to him about like child support, he's like, oh, this is the first I've heard of it. And it's like, no, it's not. You're lying through your teeth. So he definitely knows what he's doing is wrong. And I think that he's just so narcissistic, and like he's the ultimate narcissist and manipulator. Like he's a monster manipulator. Because I mean, literally, he could talk to you and tell you exactly what you want to hear, and then talk to me and tell me exactly what I want to hear, and it'd be two completely different things. But he was able to do that. Yeah. Absolutely.
Duplicitous. And so like within that then, like, so how, where is the cult kind of still going on now? Like, so there was kind of, at the end of the book, obviously, we get to that, but it kind of, there's probably a question mark around, like, you were obviously moved out of eviction. He was, he'd been arrested, but what happened then with the Order of Chapelle, or, am I saying that right? Chapelle, is
Order,
it, or Chapelle? Chapelle.
Yeah, well, yeah. Well, the thing is that there were like two Catholic, like the Diocese of Wollongong held two investigations into him and his so-called messages, and they deemed them totally not true. Actually, one of those priests that was on one of those investigations, he is now the Archbishop of Melbourne, Peter Comensoli. And the thing was that, like, I actually caused a big rift in that group because I wrote those letters. Because for me, I had no clue that this was going to happen. Literally, I was very Catholic in thinking,
Yeah.
Tony had collected all these books. He had the books of the Code of Canon Law. He had the Catechism of the Catholic Church. He had all of the books. So I knew where to go for what I needed to know. I just wish that I had kept all that, but I threw it all out when I left, and I shouldn't have, because I wish I could keep. Yeah, look at it now. But the thing was that when I wrote my letters, of which I've still got copies, my intention was that I was asking the questions in such a way whereby, on the one hand, William is standing up there on a Sunday shouting at us, saying that we're not following the rules of the Catholic Church, and yet I know what he's doing. He's not following any of the rules of the Catholic Church. And so I thought, well, on one hand, you're yelling at us, about this, but then you're not doing it. And so when I wrote the letter, I was literally asking the question, can you please explain to me how what you're doing is according to the Code of Canon Law, the Catechism of the Catholic Church, and the Magisterium of the Catholic Church? They were can you tell me how it is matching up? And of course, Malcolm Broussard wrote back, and it was just a lot of waffle, and it was just all to do with the messages that William received from the Virgin Mary. It was nothing based on the Catholic Church. So I just repeated the questions again in a second letter, and then he got pissed because clearly I didn't get the message. And then he still didn't answer the questions properly. So I wrote a third letter, and that's when Cam wrote, and he was mad, and he gave my letter to the community council. So he had chosen these 12 people to be like independent, but none of them were independent. They were all handpicked by him, and he knew which way they'd vote for him. So there was two of them that came to me and they said, Claire, you need to stop.
Okay.
You need to not write the letters, because it's, William has been William's the chosen prophet, and what he's doing is the right thing. And I just smiled sweetly and just kept going about my business. And I still wrote another letter. And then it was afterwards that they came to me some months later, and they said to me, we're sorry. We realise now that you were right.
Wow.
Because they realised that, because by that time William had been well, he'd already been arrested by the time I'd sent those letters, but then there were other things that were untangling, which then showed them that I was right after all. And so there were quite a few people that left. But then, so there was quite a few people that left. And then a while later, there was more that left. And then basically for the past probably 10, 12 years, there's been people still there that are too poor to live anywhere else. So they may not be believers still. There are a couple of diehard believers still there, but they're just too poor to live anywhere else. They just don't have any money.
Yeah.
So it's kinda still going.
Okay. And
Yeah.
the things there, like you mentioned, things started to untangle. Like, can you talk about any of them, or, what's the nature of them? Like, what was the kind of things that made people be like, whoa, what's going on here?
Well, see, when he was arrested, that was a massive shock.
Okay.
Because, and they've got the date wrong too. I forget the date that they say that he was arrested, but that's wrong, because I had baby number 8 on August 3rd, 2002, and he was arrested on August 5th, 2002. So it was a Monday, because I had the baby on the Saturday and I'd come home on the Sunday, and he was arrested on the Monday, and I didn't see anything because I was at home with a newborn. But apparently there was just police everywhere, and they were interviewing all the young girls, because obviously he was charged with pedophilia by two different women. So there was, and obviously there were some married women that were named in that as well. And so, that were complicit in it. And so there was a lot of people that were questioned, females mainly. And then quite a few, there was some that left then because they were scared. They didn't want to be questioned, and they didn't want to be like charged with anything. So they left pretty quickly. And then that would have been, so that was August, October. So within 2 months, there was some people that had left already. But then then it sort of slowed up a little bit. Then there was another chunk that left, because then they started to realise that, like, as more came out, more detail about the charges, then they were just like, we can't be here. So they moved on. And then by the time we left, because I was a bit impatient, because I was like, why can't we leave as well? But then I didn't find out until later. The house that we were living, I knew that the house that we were living in the mortgage was being paid by William Cam. And, but our name was on the papers. It was a very complicated mess. But the thing was that if we left, we had nowhere to go. But what had happened was, because I had sent those letters, William Cam stopped paying the mortgage on the house and funneled that into his criminal case. So that obviously resulted in a mortgage repossession. So when the sheriff showed up on my doorstep, like, it was a mortgage repossession. I mean, I was thrilled.
Yeah.
But I mean, I
it's
didn't
a blessing
know.
in disguise for you.
Oh, it was. So, but I was impatient, seeing all these other people moving out and thinking, I just want to go. But, it happens at the right time. I do believe that God has your back, and it happens at the right time. So it happened at the right time. And so we were able to leave. But when we left, there was still quite a few people there. Like, initially there was 180 people living there altogether. And I would say that by the time I left, there would have been at least still half there. Half, maybe a bit more, maybe.
And like, so where did Cam get all the money then? Like, for the houses, like, what, like, was income donated upwards or pooled?
There were income. There were donations, but that's a good question that I don't have a full answer for, because even now he is still able to pay a defense lawyer, even though he has no income. So we know that there are funds that have been hidden, but we don't know where.
Okay, so there's something going on. And
there's something going on, but we don't, no one has been able to find out. So we're not, but something's going on. He's got money.
Yeah, but you don't know where. And like you mentioned in the book as well, that he was, he'd go overseas and stuff. Was it like other, like sex over there, or was it like what? Yeah, why was he going overseas?
Did have.
Yeah, he had.
Well, he was obviously trying to get more followers, but he had, at the time, like when we moved there, so he had two. Well, when I say communities, I don't know how big I don't know that they were that big. They weren't an actual property. I think they were like a house where people would gather. So there was like two different communities in Germany. There was two in Canada, one in America, one in Ireland, actually. There was one somewhere else, but I can't remember.
Yeah.
But he was traveling overseas to try and, like, get more people in.
Yeah, but again, it did come crumbling down once the the charges came and stuff. Yeah, and even to go back, so I think it was like fascinating as well. Like, cause I had known nothing about these Vatican changes or anything like that. Like, I was born in '87, so again, it would have been just before my time. But I didn't realize until I was reading in the book, especially kind of in the early chapters where you detail, like, what Father Cummins, and the whole I think it was the creep of modernism. I think you've put it really beautifully when you're describing. I think it's your mum that like this fear of barcodes when they came in. Then it was the fear of
Yeah.
ATM cards and like or barcodes with the 666 on it or anything like that.
Hmm.
Like that kind of fear of modernism is was just so interesting. Like because again, I think probably I obviously didn't. I'm not a digital native. I didn't grow up with the internet, but like I think things just progress now, and you don't really give a second thought. But obviously, it was so probably
You
different
don't.
back in the '60s and '70s.
It was. And I mean, even because I work with another academic from Charles Sturt University, and he's written quite a bit about the Society of St. Pius X and also William Cam. And actually, I'm quite proud to say that we have a chapter coming out very soon in a book that's going to be printed through New York University Press. And the book is called Hiding from Herod.
Okay.
So yeah, so it's all academics, and so I've got my first chapter in there with Bernard, but even he, what he's written as well, like, and we've spoken about it, is that it's so like it was scary. Like mum would not buy any products that had the barcodes on it, and like it came down to the crunch when you have like women's personal products,
Mm,
with barcodes on them, and like you need to have those pads and tampons. Like, what are you going
yeah.
to do? Like, how are you not going to buy them? And then it was like, and then like we have Medicare here, so you may have heard about the Medicare. Yeah. So mum was a staunch. She did not want to have anything to do with the Medicare card because
Wow.
that was just Big Brother watching. But I mean, now she's accepted it. So there was a lot there when it came to the barcodes, the ATMs, the Medicare card. It like when I think about it, there was a lot of fear around all of that, around like you say, the creep of modernism. But then, like, it just seemed normal to me. I mean, it's normal when you grow up with it, right?
Yeah.
But it just was. It was very normal for me, but it didn't kind of hold us back in a way. I don't know. It's kind of weird. Like I've done a lot of reflection recently, and it's kind of like weird how you grow up with this, and it just seems very normal,
Becomes normal. Yeah.
and then you talk to somebody about it, and they're like, "What the hell? You like you grew up like that?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, yeah." So it's kind of, but yeah, the fear was real though. Like, I mean, and Bob Hawke, who was one of our prime ministers, like it all went around, like in traditional circles, he was a communist, like you can't vote for him. There's,
Yeah.
he's going to bring communism to Australia. I'm like, well, I don't, you know, we didn't know what a communist was. It was just all these, um,
And it's the
all of this,
fear mongering because the media do this to us so much. I find it just
oh,
everything. Like I think in Ireland, especially, one of the big the big accusations there lately is to keep fear mongering with the weather. Like so, it's like all these status red and orange warnings that we kind of never would have got before. And I think a lot of the retail business have started to push back because like footfall dropped so much, and they put these red and orange warnings that I don't think are really warranted. But I find this so much that there's just constant lambasting of fear, 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 fear. And
mm,
it puts people into like a very anxious kind of state all the time. And that's like, psychologically, that's not good. Uh, to be
no,
constantly exposed to like threat because, as we know from psychology, it's the event actually sometimes isn't as bad as the threat. Like they've done like a lot of studies on this where, prisoners of war and stuff, it's the fear then of when are they going to be tortured? That's actually worse than the torture and this
it
kind of state
is.
of living in that fear.
It is, and it's so true what you say. Like, I mean, for me personally, I choose not to watch the news because I don't like all the fear mongering. I like to have, if I want to know something, I will go looking for it for myself from a reputable source. But I don't want to be, like you say, lambasted with just like anything and everything that's just coming at me. Because I've also experienced well, they call that yellow journalism. I've experienced that because when we were at living on the property with William Cam, like we had a current affair come out once or twice. Current affair came out twice. 60 Minutes came out once.
What
Now
did they?
60 Minutes, yeah, 60 Minutes came out for the whole day, Gary, They were filming for the whole day. And then they got together like a certain selection of people that they chose. I wasn't part of it, where they got them together and they were asking them questions and they were filming it. Now, you can't take a day of filming and put it into 20 minutes. And that's what they did. And like, I overheard some of the things that they had actually, like, that was actually said in real life as they were recording. And then to see it on the TV, totally edited and chopped and changed, none of it. And see, this is, again, people watch this stuff on TV and they go, oh my God, that's the truth. No, it's not. You didn't see what went on behind the scenes. Yeah. I was there. And I can tell you now that there was so much shit that went down that they did not even put on. That, you know, you just cannot take a day of filming and put it into 20 minutes.
And
that
like,
doesn't
so did
work.
60 minutes make it look good or bad? Like, what do you mean by
bad.
that? Oh, they made it look bad. Okay.
Yeah, but the thing was that, like, they edited people's, like, they asked a question, but then they edited the answers.
Sneaky.
Yeah, so much that it took out all the context, and so they just edited it. So it was just completely. It was not what people meant. You know, and that's where, again, that's why I don't listen to the news. I don't watch it. I don't listen to it. If I want to know something, I will go looking for it. I won't I won't have the news on. I don't have the radio on. I prefer to listen to podcasts because I can learn a lot more that way than I can listening to the news and having that crap in my head all the time and being afraid. And like you said, you know, we fear the unknown. And I mean, I have to say, I didn't know what it was going to be like to live in the world. I was afraid of that because I'd always been taught to be afraid of that. But it had reached, the psychological stress had reached such a point that I couldn't take it anymore. And I basically gave up and said, well, living in the world has to be easier than this.
Wow. Yeah.
And I just went with it.
Yeah. And like, I think it was, because the very interesting thing about like the early chapters of your book, I think you have a line in it where it's like, I was young and you couldn't understand this new fascination with prayer. But I think the next thing you say is, but I was uncertain around how it was infringing on or drawing a border around my freedoms. So you had this like very gradual, like I think you probably grew up in like a traditional Catholic family, but then it suddenly started to kind of become a bit more extreme. Would I be correct in saying that?
Well, not a bit more. I would say a lot more extreme.
Yeah.
It was very extreme, and I found it difficult, like, to be there and have to pray. Like, we had to go to mass once a day. We had to pray 3 times a day. It was very difficult for me. And like, as a mum, you know, like, I had to look after all of my children, and I needed to, you know, like, I was doing the washing, you know, just normal mother things, you know, those were things that I did. And it was I just found it really hard because, like, you know, you'd have your baby down for a sleep and then all of a sudden, you've got to disturb them because you've got to put them in the pram and go down and go to prayers. And then William Cam had it so that we were having lunch and dinner together, all 180 people of us having lunch and dinner together. And then it was up to the mothers and the nuns to make the menu plan, to prepare all the food, to cook all the food, serve all the food, and then clean up afterwards. And like, that's a lot, Gary. That's a lot. And I didn't like that because it wasn't how I wanted to bring up my family. I wanted to have the children, you know, I want to have my husband and my children around the table where I prepare the food, we eat together, we talk, we chat, and that sort of thing. And, you know, that was being taken away from us. And I resented it. Like, see, I've grown, my vocabulary and my understanding has grown so much in the last, I would say, probably 10 years.
Yeah.
Because I've done a lot of reading, I've done a lot of reflection, I've done a lot of therapy, still continue therapy. I do a lot of reading around identity, around psychology, Um, there is actually a really great book by a Jewish sociologist called Degrees of Separation.
Okay.
I have to think of the subtitle. Um, I'll share it with you because
Mm.
I read that and I've got so many little stickers in it. I actually interviewed him um, because he talks about identity. See, identity is a very interesting thing because when people leave these groups, and even if you leave a marriage, you know, you get divorced, or you know, you leave the military, and Zellman actually talks about this in at the end of his book. So this book is actually his PhD thesis on identity, where he himself is Jewish. He grew up in Lubavitch,
Mm.
Hasidic community in New York. And then he left and he did an undergrad in psychology and a PhD in sociology. And for his PhD, he questioned 70 odd members of Lubavitch and Satmar Hasidic community members who had left. And because he was studying identity.
Mm.
And the thing is that we, you know, whether we leave a religion, whether we leave a marriage, whether we leave the military, we, you know, we draw a line in the sand and we go, that was me before, this is me now. But the thing is, and then we try to live this new me without any identification or any, we don't want to have anything to do with our old self. But it can't be like that because the
Mm.
way we grew up is part of our identity. And the way I have come to do it for myself, and I also mentor other people who come out of these groups, is that we have to find what we want. Now, I grew up a traditional Catholic. I
Mm.
don't practice my religion. However, I love going into churches. I adored going to the churches in Europe and the UK and Ireland. Like I absolutely loved it. Give me a church, honey, I'm happy. I love I love the churches. I love the architecture. I love the art. I love the Gregorian music. I love the organ music. I love the smell of incense. I love the smell of the candles. And as an Irish anthropologist says to me, he said everything seems to be better when you go into the church and you see that little wee red candle going, the sanctuary lamp. He said you're just there and it just feels like everything's going to be okay. And I don't care what anybody else says. That's comforting to me.
Yeah.
And, you know, like I don't go into churches very often, but there's times when I feel like my soul needs it. And I
Yeah.
just go there and I just do it. And I love it. And that's how I practice my own spirituality. And when I was talking to Zellman, like he grew up in a Hasidic community. And he said that like, but now he has morphed new meanings onto old practices. And I think that's very important for all of us when we are leaving important um, periods of our life behind, because there's too many people that say, like I remember actually I gave a talk in Melbourne, and for a group, and I had a copy of my book with me, and I got there a bit early, and there was a gentleman there who was so excited to meet me and all the rest of it, and then there was this older lady that came in, and he's going, "Oh, this is Claire. This is the speaker for tonight, and I'm so excited." And she's got her book. Claire, show your book to her. And I just showed it to her, and she physically recoiled away from it, and she turned it over, and she goes, "I find that offensive." And for me, I instantly knew that something had happened to her.
Yeah.
Because if you look at my book, at the front of my book, what is
Yeah.
offensive about seeing a nearly 6-year-old girl in
Making
her
a
first communion dress?
union. Yeah.
There's nothing offensive about it. And I mean, I didn't take it as an insult. I knew straight away that there was something wrong.
Something there.
And there's something that is completely unhealed. And she has spent her life running from it. And I actually feel sorry for her because she's spending so much energy in running from it rather
Correct.
than actually either healing it or understanding what would I like to keep from this? What would I like to keep from my practice? And I
Yeah.
mean, just recently I've been helping a young Hasidic lad. He left his he left his community. He's only in his early 20s, and I have helped him to assimilate back into assimilate into the world, and he's actually starting to attend university, which is like really frowned upon in the Hasidic community. And he came to me and he said, "Oh, so he's found a rabbi and he's going to synagogue." And I said, and he came to me and he said, because he's going to the synagogue, and like they're just Orthodox
Yeah.
Jewish. But the thing is, he speaks Yiddish, and it's known that those who speak Yiddish are Hasidic. So he only speaks English with them. But they're talking to him and they're thinking that, oh, he's Jewish, but he's trying to come back to his faith. So they're trying to convert him. And he has a little bit of a laugh because he's like, funny
Yeah.
you. But he came to me and he said, "Claire, how much of my story should I share? And then, like, what, what have you kept?" And I said to him, "You need to keep parts of your Judaism that you want to keep." I
Mm.
said, "Don't ditch it all, you know." And he's, like, I've made hullus with him. And he said, "I've always loved hullus. I always love plaiting it." And I said, "Well, I'll make the dough for you, and
Yeah.
you're happy. You're happy to. I'm happy for you to come and plait it, and we'll cook it together, and you can have it." Um, he's kept his phylactery, the little boxes that they have a special box with a mini Torah scroll in it, and they wrap it around their fingers and pray. So he's kept that, and he's kept some things, and he's now finding his way into what he wants to keep, and the
Okay.
different, and I think that's so important because too many people want to throw the baby out with the bathwater because I just don't want to be Catholic anymore, or I just don't want to be Jewish anymore, or I just don't want to be an evangelical anymore.
And
But
with
you
that
have to.
said there, like, so what
Mm,
did you keep then? Because I was surprised there to hear that. So, like, do you have, so
mm,
you've kept the spirituality, but like, I suppose the subscribing to a doctrine like Catholicism, you don't, but like, do you have a relationship with God or like,
yeah, I do.
yeah, but it's not
I
into, it has to be one dominate or dominion over another kind of, and I think that's, yeah,
Well, for me, I do pray, but I don't
yeah,
pray like the Our Father, the Hail Mary. Although, slight tangent, when I go to visit my parents and they go to say the Angelus, I remember a couple of
yeah,
years ago, I went to, Mum goes, "We're saying the Angelus," and I thought, "Oh my God, I said that how long?" And then in my head, I'm trying to remember the years that I haven't said it. On the outside, next in a nanosecond, my hands were joined, eyes
mm,
closed. Honestly, I was the picture of piety. And then Mum leads the Angelus, and the words come out of my mouth. And I'm like, and so as the words are coming out of my mouth, my head's going, "What the hell? How did I remember that?
yeah,
What?" And it's
muscle
so
memory,
weird. I know, but it fascinated me. But the thing is that, like, I can walk that line. Like for me, I can actually go to a Tridentine mass and I can blend straight in.
yeah,
I can, but I have my own spirituality. I prefer not to say the Catholic prayers because I think they're just too rote. They're not unique to today, to the situation, to, like when I have my kids together for dinner, we will all of us hold hands around the table, which is completely un-Catholic. But, and then I say a prayer, but that is pertinent to today, that
yeah,
situation. Um, And I think that that's much nicer than
yeah,
actually just saying the same grace that has been said for 500 years.
yeah. So it's more of a gratitude and a thanks.
Yeah, but it's a heartfelt prayer. And even
Yeah,
when I go to churches, like I literally just talk to God the
yeah,
way, you probably remember in my book when I went to the principal of the children's school when we got evicted, and he just
Yeah.
said, and he was sitting there, and he just said, "Let's just bow our heads and pray." I tell you, I I had tears coming down my cheeks because I'm like, oh my God, like he's just praying to Jesus like he's just here. And it was so heartfelt. And it was like
Yeah.
Jesus was just in the room. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to pray like this. And that's how I pray now. I literally just do it like Jesus is just here.
Yeah.
Like not sort of somewhere out there. And then I've got to be, when did I last go to confession? Am I kneeling upright? Am I, making sure I'm kneeling on hard boards and not on something soft so it shows my sacrifice? Have I fasted? Have I this? Have I that? Instead of having all these conditions, it's just like, look, Lord, I'm in a bit of strife right now. Do you think you could just sort
Yeah.
this out or lead me, guide me, whatever,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. So, and you mentioned there a few moments ago, when your children are around, a lot of children, and I think what struck me in the book as well. So when you were in, on the kind of cams, kind of was like a trailer park where you were obviously had a house there and stuff like that, but. There was another priest, you referred to him as Scotty, and
Oh,
he
yeah.
got work for Tony, I think it was in Geelong, was it? No,
Goulburn. Yeah.
Goulburn, that was it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
so Tony was gone a lot, like 9 children. How were you, like, did you have much support? Like, that's a lot of work, like.
It is a lot of work, and I didn't have support. But it's interesting because I've done, like, people have said that it's a lot of work, and it is. But it was a hell of a lot easier to have just the kids and me, because basically we had the rule of the musketeers, all for one, one for all, and
Yeah,
we all just got in and got shit done, basically. I
yeah,
mean, even now, like, we could take over the world and run it properly because they all have kindness, leadership, and common sense.
mm,
And we just did it. And it was, I think, recently I was listening to, you may have heard of her, Evie Pomporis. She wrote a book called Becoming Bulletproof. And I've been listening to a few of her podcasts, and she was talking about how she was a survivor of 9/11. And
mm,
she was saying one of the things that she believes helped her was that rather than just wallow in the shock and the horror, they got out there and were helping people. And I was thinking about that in my own life in terms of, like, the kids helped me. Like, in reality, because as you know in my book, I lost number 4, so she
mm,
passed away.
Rita.
But my blessing was having the 3 older kids, because those kids needed to be looked after. They needed to be bathed. They needed to be fed. They needed to be, like, everything needed to be done for them. So they were my blessing and they were my savior. And then, because, even though I was grieving and mourning the baby that I'd lost, I was forced to get out of bed, Gary. No one else was
Yeah.
going to look after those kids. So I was forced to get up. I was forced to function. That doesn't mean that I didn't grieve, but it
Mm,
meant that my grieving was in motion. I wasn't stuck. And then later on, when I left William Camm's group, like, I was bound and determined to change and to grow and to evolve. Mind you, I had no idea how I was going to do that. But having my kids there and being forced in a way to, to learn stuff, to change. And I instinctively knew that if I didn't change, I would lose my children. And when I say that, I mean that my children would leave home and then not want a relationship with me and not want to come back and visit. And I desperately wanted to have a relationship with them. And because like, years later, as I became to know more and meet more people like myself who had left these groups, I found that there were some that were like a pot plant. They're like a root-bound pot plant that you literally move from one side of the deck to the other side of the deck. But
mm,
they're not. But they've only moved places, but they've not moved inside their head.
yeah.
And that doesn't bode for change. And
Yeah.
so my kids have been my greatest support, my biggest blessings, and they're the ones that are like they're my cheer squad. Like
Yeah.
honestly, like my youngest says, get it, queen. And that's what it is,
Definitely.
Um,
So how did they process then, like the time in cams and like what's their lasting maybe impression and stuff like that? Like, do they have they gone through, I suppose, that discovery of reflection that you've gone through?
they have to a point, but I think there's still a lot more to go. Um, and obviously, the three older ones were more affected than the younger ones. Um, so they have, so the three older ones are still on the journey, but like, I mean, this journey doesn't end, like
No.
even for me, like, especially going to university, doing a lot of reading around, anthropology, sociology, behavioral
Yeah.
science, that sort of thing. Like, I apply that to my own life as well. So I don't just, for me, it's not just about reading something and then just reading it. For me, it's like, well, how can I apply that to my own life? Or sometimes something will jump out and I think, oh my God, that's me. Um, and then I understand the why. Um, because for me, it's all about growing, changing, and evolving to be the best person I can be, but then to also help and to teach others, because I've seen so many women, especially, be in such turmoil because they don't know how to put one foot in front of the other. And then they're busy being resentful and having hate towards the group rather than having the gentleness and the compassion with themselves. And like, not everything about the group is bad. Like, it can be, but
Mm.
what were the things that you learned? Did you learn resilience? Did you learn fortitude? Did you have a new understanding of something? And that's the way I've come to see my life now, is like all of these, I've got all these different identities, like people are shocked to learn that I can milk a cow and a goat and I can churn butter. I can bake bread from scratch. Like, I mean, in reality, when am I going to like milk a cow or a goat now? But hey, it makes
Yeah.
for a bit of fun conversation. Um,
Definitely.
but I have all of these little, how could you say, useless pieces of information or skills, but it gives me power over my own destiny. You know, it's just like the other day, the house that I'm house sitting, the something shorted out and the electric door wouldn't go up, so I couldn't get the car out. So what do you think? First thing is like, okay, the fuse box. Let's go
Mm.
there. Then I noticed that she doesn't have a safety switch. Okay, cool. Right. Next thing. And you just, and I can do that. But
Yeah.
so many people don't know how to do it. It's just something simple.
Yeah.
Um, so not everything that happened in my life has been bad. I've got all these different kinds of skills and different kinds of identities that I love about myself.
Yeah. And
And
you mentioned there a moment ago, like resilience. Like what did you? I know the journey now, like it's a continuous journey, but what have you found? Like, what's the sense of uh, feeling that you found? Like when you reflect on all this, is it like obviously there's going to be like a lot of, I always say anyhow, like there's strength to be found in struggle, and like there was definitely struggle throughout your journey. But what did you find? What's the kind of resounding feeling that you feel?
well, I think that, well, see, I've also noticed with my kids that they've got a lot of resilience as well. And I think that resilience is a really great virtue to have, and a gift, because one thing I've found today is too many people go, oh, it's too hard. It's too hard to change.
Yeah,
But the thing is, there is joy to be found in walking through the fire. Like, there is that peace that you find walking through the fire. Um, you know, there's sometimes when I haven't wanted to face therapy. Like, I have to say that 20, 2020 was the worst. Like, that year was worse than when I lost my daughter. and that's saying
Okay.
something. That was worse because when COVID happened,
Hmm.
I had religious trauma and I recognized it.
And what's that? Sorry, religious like trauma.
Well, religious trauma is very much so when COVID happened, and I'll just speak from an Australian experience because
Yeah.
I don't know what it was like for you, like you guys in Ireland, but like here in Queensland specifically, like we've got, the 5 states and 2 territories,
Yeah.
and each one has their own leader. And so each one, decided that this one was going to close the borders, this one was going to wait, then another one was going to do this, another one was going to do that. Thankfully, here in Queensland, we were a little bit not lax, but we weren't as strict. So, but I noticed that, like initially I heard about COVID, like nobody knew what COVID was, whatever. It
No.
was happening. Initially, it was happening in China. Okay, so
Mm.
it's over there, it's not here. But then all of a sudden, too quickly, it seemed to come to Australia. And then Australia was closing its borders. And I thought, oh, okay. But then it almost seemed like the next second we were closing state borders. And then I felt like I was drowning. All of a sudden, I had, I thought that how I'd grown up with all the prophecy around the end of the world and the barcodes and all the things we spoke of before,
Yeah.
I thought that was like, back then. But all of a sudden, I had this overwhelming fear of what if William Cam was right?
Oh.
Like, oh shit,
Mm.
has God come out to get me?
Must have been.
It was terrifying, Gary. It was terrifying.
Yeah.
Because it was terrifying because, like, I had the devil on one shoulder and an angel on the other shoulder. And the devil was just like, see, told you, you made a mistake. Cam was right.
Oh
God's out to get
wow.
you. And then, the angel on my shoulder was like, no, this is not what was, you know, it was it was terrifying. And I knew I needed, like, I was still already having therapy, but I went to see my psychologist and she was very helpful. But the thing for me was, though, I needed to know whether it was the truth or not.
Yeah.
I had to know. Because there's one thing to have therapy, but I wanted to know whether it was the truth. So I contacted my academic friend Bernard and I said to him, I'm having religious trauma. Like, everything is coming back to roost. I don't know how to deal with this. And I need to know whether what I grew up with was true. And he pointed me to this book that's not in print anymore, but it's an old archived book. And it was actually written, it was commissioned by the Catholic Church. And it was written in 1914 or 1915 because that was when the Great War was happening and they thought that was the end of the world. And
Yeah.
so there was a whole lot of prophecy going around that. And so I literally downloaded that book. I took it off to Officeworks and I got it printed, and it's like an inch and a half thick. And I read that from cover to cover because it goes through the whole history um, of the prophecies and stuff, which I had learned as a kid. But what I discovered was that it started in the mid, I think, 16 or 1700s. And then with the printing press, it just morphed every 25 to 50 years into something else.
Yeah.
So what I
Constant.
discovered was a pattern. So while my parents were so afraid of the barcode, the Medicare card, and the ATM card, let us roll around to COVID, where everybody's going, don't have the vaccine because there's robots in it or whatever, and we're
Yeah.
getting injected, and they're watching us, and they all the rest of it. And I thought, damn, wow. So what's really happened is every 25 or 50 years, it just morphs into something
Something.
else.
Yeah.
And so knowing that it wasn't true really helped me heal. But
Mm.
I tell you what, Gary, it was terrifying. Like, it was, I wasn't sleeping properly. I was ruminating. I was terrified of, like, I couldn't watch the news. And I was like a robot. I was
And
functioning.
I can
Oh, it was
imagine
awful.
I can imagine for you as well, like especially so. It's like what happened with a lot of COVID was the government became very authoritarian. So, and you'd grown
Mm.
up in kind of a family that was, I don't want to say authoritarian, but definitely more like traditional and more strict when it comes to our own religious rules, like following rules, really routine prayers 3 times
Hmm.
a day, rosaries. So you were used to that. Then comes obviously there was that kind of similar authoritarian control. You'd
Mm.
escaped all of it, and then next minute this. So I can imagine probably a large part of where them feelings really started to manifest with was, oh God, I'm being controlled again, and that
Again,
must have
yeah,
been horrific.
it was real. And then, and the thing was that people didn't understand religious trauma. They don't understand where it comes from. And like, religious trauma, like even that lady that I spoke about before who turned my book over because she found it, um, she found it offensive. She
Yeah.
wasn't finding it offensive. She was finding it traumatic because
Yes.
it triggered something inside of her. And it was, for me, walking through that fire, because I just had to know. And I remember literally sitting on the bed just going, okay, if it's true, I'm going to do whatever I have to do.
Yeah.
If it's not true, well, then I'm free. But come what may, I'm reading this book and I'm going to do what I'm going to, you know, let the chips fall where they may. And that was, and that did teach me resilience. I mean, that's only one example, but I mean, there's lots of examples throughout my life where there was, resilience. And I mean, you've got it in my book where, I was, we got evicted and then I was trying to find a house.
Mm.
Like, but the thing was that it was the kids because I was their stability, I was their security. Tony was useless. He wasn't going to do anything to help us or the children. So I thought, well, you know, they deserve a better life. They deserve to be free. They deserve to be educated. And so I'm going to do my darndest to make sure that that happens. And I mean, I was obviously dragged along in their wake because but I wanted to be better. I wanted to be educated. I looked for ways of doing that. Um, and I still look for ways of doing that. And I actually love that journey. I love the journey of curiosity and learning and always asking questions and finding ways of like, oh, this relates to me. Okay,
Yeah.
how can I change? What can I change? How can I change? You know, is this good for me? Or most times I can see the benefit in actually learning something new and changing.
Yeah. And how did that education journey? Like, did you mention there you went back to uni? Was it or? Uh,
Well, I went to I started my first university degree in 2021 and I graduated last year. So,
okay, nice.
yeah,
Yeah. And what did you
yeah.
study?
So, religion, anthropology, sociology.
Oh, lovely. Yeah. So, oh
Yeah.
God, that must have been fascinating. Well, you would have had like a really good, probably, grip on the religion and then the anthropology is tying a lot back to the culture and stuff like that, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, I loved it. I loved every part of my university
Yeah.
journey and the people that I've met and interacted with. And and like, especially reading, like when I was reading, a lot of religious stuff, and I'm like, that's me. But what's weird is that the academic book that's coming out, it was proposed by a sociologist named Susan Jean Palmer, who is in Canada, and she's been studying new religious movements and cults for. She's in her late 70s, so she's been doing it for the last 40 years or something.
Wow.
And like it's, I actually know her, so I've met her, I've spoken with her, and it's actually there's a foreword by Eileen Barker, and Eileen Barker is Scottish, and she is in her 80s, and she is a force to be known when it comes to new religious movements. So I feel honoured that, like, I've spoken to Eileen Barker. I know Susan Jean Palmer, um, but the thing is that it's just like reading their stuff in uni, like reading readings and going, I've spoken to these people, and like, and then also when I'm reading it, I'm like, oh my God, like this is basically, part of my story,
Yeah.
and it's just like, And now, that I have this academic chapter, like for me, it's about like, this is actually, so what I've written is actually my story with the academic layer on it.
Oh, so
And
that's
it's,
what the chapter is. It's
yeah,
kind of
so it's a slice, it's a slice of my story
yeah,
with the academics
underpinnings of it.
underpinning of it. Yeah. And
Um,
it's just like, and so I feel so proud of that. Like I just got the email this week to say that they're just about to run it, to print it. And it just feels,
brilliant.
oh my God, it's so exciting. And it's, to know that anybody reading that, like that particular chapter, so that is someone, me, who's actually lived it, and it's my story. It's not like because like many academics, like they write stuff, but they've not lived it. They've
Not
studied
lived,
it,
and there's a
but
difference.
they've not lived it. But in
Yeah.
this case, I've lived it and I've studied it.
And so you can apply the theory and the actual lived experience, which is going to make for very interesting. Well, what's the name of it again? I think you mentioned it earlier on, but the
Hiding
name
from
of the
Herod.
hiring.
Hiding.
And what's Herod?
Yeah.
Herod is he
Well,
the guy
Herod.
in
Yeah. Well,
that
it's kind of a
King
pun
Herod?
from King Herod.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
But I'll send you the name, like the name of the book
yeah.
when it comes out. But you'll be able to buy it from New York University Press.
Brilliant. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Just actually another book there because it's only after. I actually nearly hesitate to bring it up because I think you said after you read it you didn't really sleep for a week with panic attacks. But the beautiful side of evil. You you read this book
Mm,
in when you were living in Cams, but
mm.
again, I just said instead in lieu of looking it up on Google because it was like really interested. I said I'd ask here as well, like what was so horrifying about this book? Like obviously the title actually is kind of me freaked out already. The beautiful side of
Well,
evil. But what was it about?
the thing was, well, see now I've actually still got the book. It's in storage, so I should get it out and read it because I'd have a different lens now.
Yeah,
But the thing was, it was about a group in South America somewhere, I think, and I'm just trying to think of all like the different facets of it, but it was to do with, I think, there was a lot of manipulation. There was a lot of
cult
blood involved. So I'm not quite sure whether there was some, not human
sacrifice
sacrifice,
cult.
not necessarily human sacrifice, but some
Yeah,
sort of, yeah. But I just remember, I think it was also there was some what would you call it? Like visions, but demonic visions, and
ah,
it scared me shitless.
yeah,
Um, and but even back then, I'm glad that you reminded me of this actually, because I will go hunting for that book so that I can read
yeah,
it again because it's been obviously because when I read it, it would have been 2003 or 2004
yeah,
maybe. Um, and I haven't looked at it since then. But now, having come so far and done a degree and sort of understanding a lot more, it'd be interesting to see. But even back then, with no tertiary learning, as I read that, I could see some parallels with the group, and I thought, oh shit, I need to be out of here. Like
yeah.
that's what it did, and so that's what it did. It scared me. It terrified me actually, but I could see some parallels, and I will get that book out actually. I'll reread
Yeah.
it
And with that,
because
like, so just when you were in camps, then, like, even when you were going through like this stage, like, uh, with your own like siblings and stuff, were they like checking in? Were they worried that okay, Claire, were people reaching out, being like, "Are you okay?" Or was it no? Was it just kind of a bit normal, or like, because that's the thing I was kind of worrying about. Like, you had a few brothers and sisters, like, but when you were in camps, like, were they? Were you in regular contact with them? And if so, what was were they like, get out of that place?
well, it was no, I wasn't close with my siblings at the time.
Okay.
My parents would ring up every so often, but the problem was that Cam had said, because we only had like the house phone, there was no mobiles.
Mm.
Um, and Cam had said that every house, the phone was tapped. So I was
Control.
scared of saying to, yeah, it was not true, but I mean, at the time I thought it was true. So whenever my parents would ring up, I'd just be like, yeah, everything's fine, blah, blah, blah. And I'd just waffle on about kids and normal stuff. Um, I know a couple of times my mum said, oh, so when are you moving from that place? But then this is where I've had a very troubled sort of relationship with my parents, because on the one hand, mum would say, oh, so when are you moving from that place? And then I'd sort of be going, oh, well, I don't know, blah, blah, I didn't really know. I sort of fobbed it off. But then when I did move, and then when I divorced Tony, she didn't support the divorce. And I said to her, well, he gambled. He was
Yeah.
abusive. And she goes, no, well, you took a vow and you stay with your husband no matter what. And then I turned around and I said to her, what about if he leads you to a cult? And she goes, well, you follow him. And I thought, well, thanks. So I didn't get the support. So I was, I didn't get the familial support. I was on my own. And, like that was tough. It was tough
That's
to hear
it.
that from your own mother because, but I mean, hearing that, like it was really rough and it was tough to hear that. But then for me, it has been, I don't want to be that kind of mother with my own children.
Mm.
So that has fueled me and made me a better mother.
Okay.
So, I guess again, resilience, that's where it's come back to resilience because, these things, because I mean, honestly, I do remember, I mean, my kids keep telling me I need to write another book. So I am going to do that at some point. But one of the things that I remember, the second house that we moved to after the cult, I remember being so overwhelmed one day. I don't know I can't remember the actual, like what it was causing the overwhelm, but I felt so overwhelmed. I walked into the walk-in wardrobe in my bedroom and I sat down in the corner and I cried because I didn't know what to do, like what decision I was supposed to make, how I was supposed to go forward with all of these kids. But I literally just sat there in the corner, just cried. And then it was like, okay, wipe the tears, get up and out. And it's like, okay. Because I didn't want my kids to see me really upset
Yeah.
because it also, like, it made them anxious. It would make them anxious. And then it wasn't their responsibility. I didn't want them to become mini adults. Like, I mean, in a certain way, the three older ones kind of did, but I wasn't expecting that. But it was because, I had my children so young and then I didn't really know what I was doing. I mean, I had 4 teenagers and 4 teenagers in high school. By the time I was 36, and yet when I was meeting other 36-year-old women, they, they'd had a lot, they'd had a life, they'd been to uni, they'd traveled, they'd, had a couple of relationships before they actually got married, and then they had kids in primary school. Like, I mean, I had kids in high school and primary school. It was, it was tough. And I was just so different to everybody else because I was dealing with teenage stuff and they were only dealing with kids in primary school.
Yeah.
It was rough,
Yeah.
but I just did it because I had to.
That's it. And it's like, I think all them events like eventually build up a strength and a kind of, it is that resilience. I think resilience is a good word. And I think it's probably a word that like, it's a very, like in psychology and in therapy, like resilience is the thing that I'm really trying to build, but it's well, you need to go through the struggle, like to get the resilience. That's the whole thing, and it's trying to champion that struggle more so than just seeing it as a complete negative. Because I think if we're able to see the positive coming out of something, that really helps build that future strength. Yeah, I
Mm.
just want to ask one more thing. Like, so since the book came out, like, what was the fallback for on you? Like, with your, like, did you have much pushback from your family? Any of them that were in the SSPX, CAMS, all that. Like, where did, because I can imagine people would have had variant opinions, but like, what was that like for you?
Well, strangely enough, nobody really came forward with anything negative. I mean, I did hear that one of my sisters was annoyed because I mentioned her in the book, but I'm thinking, you're my sister, and I just mentioned that you were born, for God's sake. And I mean, it's true. I mean, so like when I wrote the book, though, I always tried to be like, as I mentioned before, I couldn't put a lot of things in there from my time at camps. I won't be able to
Mm,
do that until he's dead. Basically,
yeah,
once he's dead, it's on. Um,
yeah,
but um, I also wanted to be thoughtful about, like members of my family that would read it or my own children, because it's all very well to just write something and put it out there and go, well, this is my story. But yes, it is. And you're welcome to do that. But I also think that you need to take on you need to have a little bit of thought about who's going to
yeah,
read this in the future. Because one thing I've learned too is that emotions and feelings change. So, you can have very, very strong emotions and very, very strong feelings about different things, but it does change over
yeah,
time. And you've got to recognize that. And so I can feel very strongly about something right now, but that will change in 2 or 3 years' time. And so when you're writing something, you need to write it in such a way, or I tried to write it in such a way where it wasn't bitter and twisted, it wasn't a misery memoir, and it's something to help people learn. Because I discovered when I left that I didn't know anybody else like me. And so that's why. So I didn't write the book because I thought I was going to be a millionaire. I wrote the book because I was trying to help people. And
yeah,
I've actually met some really lovely people through women reaching out after watching one of my TEDx talks or reading my book, and they've said how much it's helped them. And even
yeah,
with the podcasts, like every podcast I've done, I have never advertised myself. People have always approached me, and I love doing podcasts because I get to um, help other people who might be listening. But also for me, I get to actually talk about, like, I can actually tell people or teach people what I've learned over time. Because if you listen to some of my first podcasts, like I did tell my story, but then over time, I've learned more, I've reflected, I've had therapy, and it's like, I look at one thing, but it has different perspectives. And I have different thoughts about it now. I don't feel so strongly about that now because I've obviously healed and reflected and journaled, and you get a different understanding. And something that I may have hated about myself before, now I've come to love because I see it's as part of my identity.
yeah,
So it's very, you know, and I always find that I'm always asked a question, at least one question that's different or a different perspective with every podcast. And a couple of times I've been asked questions where I actually don't know the answer because it's never occurred to me before. And so I will say to them, okay, I've never been asked that before. What comes to mind right now is blah, blah, blah. However, I need to go have a think about this. I need to go and journal about it. I need to go and do some reading about it because then I want to then um, put that into my own life. And so I see this as also a learning journey for me. That's why I like to give talks and podcasts because people just ask questions, and I love the questions. I love what I can learn from them for myself.
definitely. And so, like, what are some of them lessons? Like, is yeah, I'll just actually go with that. Just very, very open ended there. What are some of them lessons?
Well, like one person asked me, like, what would my legacy, like what would I like my eulogy to have in it? And I thought, well, damn, that I
A
just
biggie.
I didn't think of that. Like, and I was a bit shell shocked when they asked because I thought, oh, like I'd not thought about that. But then my initial answer was that if people can people can learn from my story to be free, like not to break those mental boundaries that you have in your head. As I mentioned before, you can have a root bound plant that you just literally move physically from one spot on the deck to another spot on the deck, but it's not going to actually grow because it's root bound. You
Yeah.
need to actually pull it all out of the pot, trim off all the roots, spread them all out, get new soil and a bigger pot, and it will flourish. And that's the same with our brain. And so when she asked me that question, I was just so, I was thinking, if people can learn from me to be open, be curious, like have that resilience. The struggle is there. The struggle is always going to be there. If you try to avoid it, it just gets harder. And it is true, that saying of, God speaks to you in the breeze. And if you don't listen to the breeze, then it's the wind, then it's a gale, then it's a tornado. And then finally it's just bricks, because it's just like you're too dense to get the message. And it's absolutely true. Like if you choose not to deal with the struggle, and if bad things are happening in your life, you need to ask yourself, like, hello, like if you have a string of bad relationships, hello, who's the common denominator? Me. What am I doing wrong? Like what am I doing wrong? Like what is there something in my past I haven't healed? Is it a schema that is it a schema that I am prone towards? Like you need to really reflect.
And I
You
think
can't.
people don't. I think people, instead of asking what am I doing wrong, I think they look for reasons of why other people are doing wrong and project onto that.
They do. As somebody said to me recently, they're taking the monkey off their shoulder and putting it on yours.
Mm.
And they're not taking responsibility for their actions. And, because if you do the wrong thing, like I remember my dad saying, he said, never tell a lie. Don't tell lies because it always catches up with you. So I've always told the truth. He said, always tell the truth, even if you've done the wrong thing, admit it. Just
Mm.
admit it because it goes easier for you. And he said, work hard. Do an honest day's work for an honest day's pay. Don't bother showing up if you're going to half-ass it. Like if you're not going to do the job properly and you're not interested in doing it, get out of my sight.
Mm.
And it's true. And I think those simple lessons, they might sound very simple, but you know what? That's the building of resilience, the small bits of resilience. Like, you don't feel like getting up today. Well, tough luck. The cows and the goats are out there and they need to be milked. They're not waiting until 9 o'clock. You need to roll yourself out of bed now, chop, chop, do it.
Mm.
And you just end up by doing it. But too many people, as you say, they want the soft life. It's like, oh, I feel tired, so I'll just snooze. And I mean, like right now, I've got a job at the university and I'm the weird one. I'm the weird one because I'm the one that gets up at 4:30 to go to the gym. Because if I don't go to the gym then, I don't feel like it later. So I get up, I go to the gym at 4:30 in the morning. I work out. I'm having my breakfast and coffee at 6 o'clock in the morning. And I
Yeah.
mean, and then my work colleagues are rolling up at 9:30, yawning like they've only just rolled out of bed, and they need coffee to fuel them. I don't
Mm.
need coffee to fuel me. I have coffee because I enjoy it.
Yeah.
There's a difference. And, when I eat to fuel my body so that I can work out. I don't work out so that I can eat what I want. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? But I'm used to being the weird one. I'm used to doing things differently, and I actually like it because I'm going to be the one that's going to be living till I'm 100 while the rest of you are decrepit. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Um,
But I
and
think you
so,
had that in the book on the early chapters as well, where you said, like, I think it was with you and your siblings as well, like, you kind of were always felt out of place, like when you were kind of socializing with other kids and stuff like that. So you're probably really used to just having that being that bit different.
well, I was always the weird one in terms of, different things like my life trajectory and everything like that.
And life
But now,
journey.
yeah, well, life journey. But now, I've come to accept it. And it's just
Yeah.
like, you know
Well,
what?
that's a
If you
good
think
thing.
if you think I'm weird, I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
I don't care. Like, and that's what I mean. I'm in this job, and then people do think I'm weird because I get up so early and I train and I lift weights and all the things. Well, that's fine. You know what? I'm doing it because I want to be healthy and I want to be strong. I don't want
Yeah.
to be old. I don't want to be old and decrepit.
Yeah.
So choose your hard.
Yeah. And there,
So
again, it sets you in such a good motion when you go up and just do a session. Like putting your body through a stress really early on in the day makes the day so much easier because then, a
I've already
snotty
done the
email or
hard thing.
something's far easier to contend with after lifting a few 100 kilo or that.
Exactly. Like that's what people, because I hear the office, different people speaking and whatever else. And like, I overheard a work colleague say the other day that she'd watched, I haven't watched it, The Handmaid's Tale. I haven't watched it, but I've heard about it. And,
Yeah.
um, it is a bit close to the bone because,
Yeah.
what I've heard, because and I heard my work colleague go, "Oh, it's just too real. It's just too real." And I'm just thinking, honey, you've lived in a very like sheltered life.
Mm.
I've actually lived close to that. Like I
Yeah.
didn't experience it personally, like in terms of like the forced rape or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I know people who have. And it's just, it's a little bit frustrating when you hear people that have never had anything difficult in their life and going, "Oh, it's too real, it's too real." And I'm thinking, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You know, you just don't. You just, and that's what I mean. My trajectory, my life journey has been very different to like people that I work with. But I like the fact that I've had a different journey because it makes me different. And
Yeah.
in my mind, I have a lot of different gifts and skills that serve me well.
Yeah. And
And
again,
it
your
actually,
tolerance for like hardship and struggle is so much higher, I think. I think that's probably one of the biggest things for people that don't go through any struggle is like they seem to, I don't want to say crumple, but uh, they seem to kind of struggle with any sort of hardship, which is not really good. Like, and that's why, like, some people say conscription is really good, or like spending a year in the military, like pushing your body, like
yeah,
even weights, going down to the gym, putting
mm,
your body through some stressors is really
mm,
important because you can tell very easily people that haven't, had to contend with any stress really or tough stressors in life. Uh,
mm,
everything is kind of more of a problem, and they just don't understand, like
mm-hmm.
how to get through really simple struggles, like when, people have been through something or it's like water off a duck's back,
Yeah, I know.
they're able to just carry on like very easily.
Yeah, I also wonder whether it's because I'm brought up in the country because I see very different. I like very early on, I noticed a big difference between country people and city people
Mm.
because city people are very soft. They're very, like for them, like milk comes from the carton at the supermarket.
Yeah.
You know, I remember actually when I was a checkout chick in 1988 and here, like in Melbourne, and there was a strike. There was like the farmers went on strike because they were only getting paid. I think it was $2 a litre or something. No, a dollar a litre or something for milk.
Mm.
And clearly, there was also, I think there was a farmer strike and there was also like a delivery truck strike. And so I remember that there was people coming in and they obviously wanted to buy their milk and there was no milk in the cabinet in the fridge. And then they'd come and get cranky at the checkout chicks, thinking, like saying something to the effect of, "You've got the cows out the back, why aren't you milking them?" And I'm like, honey, do you
Yeah.
realize the process?
Yeah.
Like, there's a process to this. And no, we don't have cows out the back to milk.
Yeah.
Like, and it became very clear to me very quickly that the city people are just so, and they're just so unaware of where their food comes from, for instance. And I mean, I noticed that in COVID, like instead of actually like growing a few greens out the back, they've got to go and buy all of the packet spinach.
Yeah.
Hello, like
And the panic buying and that was like the wildest.
I know. And then, like the flour, like how much of that flour went to landfill because nobody bakes these days?
Yeah. Or maybe don't
People,
even really know how.
that's it. But I mean, in my mind, like even that was one thing that helped me through my religious trauma was actually baking and baking bread
Mm.
because I can bake bread from scratch. Like I can
Yeah.
have, I don't have to measure anything or anything like that. I can just do it.
Yeah.
And it gives you a real power over your destiny. And I've even noticed with my kids, like when they've gone to work, like I remember like one of my daughters, she was I think 17 and she was working in a pub, and one of her 25-year-old colleagues came to her and said, "Oh, do you know how to mop a floor?" And Beth looked at her like she had two heads, and she's like, "Yeah, why?" And she goes, "I don't know how to mop a floor." She said,
That
"Can
is
you?"
why.
And she said, "Can you teach me?" And Beth just rolled her eyes and she just went, "Oh my God." She said, "Just go home and I'll do it. Because by the time I teach you how to do it, it's going to take ages. Just let me do it." And like, even my youngest, when I went to pick him up from Hungry Jack's one night, and he goes, "Oh my God." And I said, "What happened?" He goes, "I was teaching this girl who was the same age as him, 16. He said, I was teaching her to clean the toilet. I specifically told her not to spray bleach on the mirror. But what did she do?
Oh,
She sprayed the bleach on the mirror." And he said, "How could she not know how to not clean a toilet?" I said, "Honey, not everybody does."
yeah.
It's just,
Yeah. But the
and
mop is wild because it's so intuitive. Like, it's just,
they didn't know how to mop the floor. But the thing is, but see, for my kids, when they've moved out, all of the washing, the cooking, and the cleaning has been completely normal.
yeah.
And it's given them power over their destiny because they know how to rent, they know how to pack up and clean when they need to, when they need to leave. They know how to wash, cook, all of those things. Like they can
Be
run
self-sufficient to an
exactly.
extent. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, their peers are amazed that they have such a repertoire of being able to cook, like bake and cook,
Yeah.
like real food. We're not talking 2-minute noodles here.
Noodles. Yeah.
We're talking like spag bowl from scratch, lasagna,
Yeah.
like pies, things like this. They can do this.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
just and I think that's what the world has lost a bit today with the young people. They're not being taught these valuable skills that teach self-sufficiency, that teach them power over their own destiny, that teach resilience, and also teach them to have some um, routine. Because I mean, when you get up in the morning, you've got to think about what am I going to have for dinner tonight? Have I already pre-made it in the freezer, or is it in the fridge, or do I have to make it from scratch?
Yeah. I think you're 100% right. And I think the more digitalization takes, uh, intensifies, the less and less. And the more people that get packed into cities, because you just don't like need that. Like when food is on your doorstep there, like me and my wife just moved into the country there recently.
Oh, lovely.
And it's just so lovely. I love being kind of in nature and stuff like that. But when you are in cities and stuff, everything is convenient because
Mm.
everything is on your door and stuff like that. So people, don't have to learn how to cook. There's delivery apps that are bringing the food to you, and
Oh,
it's just, yeah. And I think it's just the digitalization's going to, because people are going to spend more time on their phone and less time doing things. And that time doing things would have been, learning basic skills. I don't want to call them
mm.
survival skills, but like, we don't know what's around the corner, another like pandemic or anything like that. And the last one just showed how underprepared people are for
Oh,
any
yeah.
sort of event.
But see, also, I think people miss out on the joy of the simple things. Because you know what? Like COVID, everybody, like here in Australia, people were buying massive freezers and buying frozen meals, frozen veggies, meat to freeze, because they were thinking about, I need to have this whole repertoire
Yeah.
of food. But in reality, if you can bake bread, like I was just shopping with my daughter Beth yesterday, actually. She goes, "Oh my God," she said, "I always dream about the bread that you used to make when we
Mm.
were living at William Camp, because we actually had I had the wheat and I used to grind the wheat immediately before I made the bread. So the bread was just like,
So
oh,
fresh.
and it was so, and we had this open fire, and I used to push all the red coals away, and then I had a cast iron dish that I used to put the dough into, and
Mm.
then put it amongst the coals. And and Beth said to me yesterday, she said I couldn't wait until it was just cool enough to cut the end off and put butter on it and honey on it.
Yeah.
And when you've got bread like that, you can have bread and cheese, which goes with tea, coffee, beer, and wine,
Mm.
or you can have like butter or jam on it.
Yeah.
Like, and to me, it's the food of kings. Why?
Yeah.
Why do you have to have like God knows how many things? If it comes down to it, and the joy of actually baking the bread, the joy of like mixing it and watching it rise, and I find it very meditative.
Yeah.
Whenever I'm stressed, I make bread, and I find a lot of joy in it, and it actually gets the creative juices going. And I know with Michelle Obama's second book, I forget what it's called, but I've read it. She was talking about knitting and sewing or crocheting, doing something creative with our fingers. That we're still doing something, but it's more meditative, and
Yeah.
it's creative, and it brings a joy. And I mean, this morning I went and bought coffee, and there was an older lady sitting down, and she dragged out her knitting, and I just watched her as she's just knitting, and it brought a smile to my face, because it's something so simple and seemingly old-fashioned, but it's so therapeutic and creative. And these simple things bring a joy. And I think a lot of people these days, they're too busy watching Netflix or the
Yeah.
TV, or they're too busy watching something or flicking on their phone, that instead of looking for those simple things, the sunset, the sunrise, you know,
Yeah.
yes, I
Which is
go to the
so
gym.
beautiful to see
I
when you
know.
get a
I
good
mean,
one.
I I go to the gym early in the morning, and then when I come out, the light's coming up over the sky, and it's like, oh, it's a fresh new day. You know,
Yeah.
it's just nature. As my friend who is a horticulturist, he said, Mother Nature, if only people would look around, has given us so many gifts.
Yeah.
And it's
So many.
so, like the flowers and the trees, and then you smell, like here in Queensland, we have like the frangipanis and the mock orange that bloom twice a year. And then only a couple of weeks ago, it started blooming for the first time this year. And it's like, oh, it's
Yeah.
joy, the
Yeah.
joy,
Connected.
the simple joy of life is what makes it worth living. And I think we need to get back to that, to those simple things. And I mean, I did love getting back to Ireland and seeing that. Like, that was like connecting. And, I went to the butter factory in Cork, and it just brought back so many memories, because my parents have the original family butter churn, and
Okay.
just walking in there and just seeing so many familiar things. And it was just a real joy to the senses to have that. Um, and, it's true, people have lost that connection with each other, with nature. And yes.
Yeah. I 100% agree. I just find everything, and I think it's like so therapeutic. Like, I think they had there was a psychology study, I think, where they brought patients to, like people that were in recovery and like mental health and stuff. They brought them to like a farm, and like it like pretty much was a better treatment than like SSRIs and like
Oh,
antidepressants and stuff like that. And I think it's just so ignored that uh, the reformative powers and the restorative powers of nature, and actually being connected to something like, which I think really cities really take it out of you. You live in a city for a year, and it like changes your whole mind frame really.
mm,
And it's not that there's nothing wrong, but I think there's nothing wrong with cities. Uh, but by God, when you live more in the country and you have more of a connection with nature, just there seems to be a built-in purpose there that kind of only gets activated when you're in nature. But yeah,
mm.
it's beautiful. I suppose any lasting words there, Claire, before we finish up? Any more lessons you know, because I think there's been some great moments there throughout the podcast. But yeah, any closing words?
Oh my gosh. Um, well, I just think that, what I've just said in the last few minutes,
Mm.
I think connecting with yourself and whatever journey that you are on or have been on and you're struggling with, like, rather than look back with resentfulness or
Mm.
hate or I wish I hadn't done that or I could have made a different decision, you didn't. And you didn't make a different decision, and this happened for a reason. There have been people who have read my book and have said, "Oh my goodness, you've had such a terrible life." And I've been shocked to hear that because I'm like, well, actually, it wasn't that terrible. I mean, I didn't think that it was terrible. I mean,
Mm.
I've learned a lot from it. It's given me lots of gifts. It's given me a lot of practical skills and talents. And I actually like myself for who I am. And I
Yeah.
think that, as I spoke earlier about identity, and I'll share the name of that book with you so you can share it with the people because I found that book so helpful. Um, Even though it's written about Hasidic Jews, I think that a lot of different people can find they can connect to different parts of the study. But I think you need to really reflect and journal about your life and look upon what's happened to you as being lessons to learn and what can you learn from it. How did it make you grow, or how didn't it make you grow? Have you been so busy in anger, resentfulness, and regret that you're not seeing the lessons? Because you can become very bitter and twisted. And it was actually told to me not long after I left, this person said to me, be wary of like cult awareness groups because a lot of these people have left whatever group it was and they've collected a few other members with them. And all they do is that they bitch and moan about and regurgitate everything they've been through.
Mm.
And they actually become a cult within themselves because
Again,
they're
yeah.
so busy, but they're in it all the time because they keep regurgitating the same thing
Mm.
rather than actually stepping away from it and going, okay, it wasn't great. However, I've learnt these lessons. And
Yeah.
I do think that we can learn these things, like we can learn lessons from our past. And I think that that is the most important thing. And what did all those little things, like for me, as I mentioned before, making bread and milking cows and milking goats and being able to fix a fence and, that sort of thing. I'm not going to use those skills again, probably, but you know what? It makes for great conversation. It
Yeah.
makes you unique.
Yeah.
And I think that's something you need to embrace is your own unique self rather than being like, I want to be like someone else. You're not like someone
Be
else.
you.
Be you. So I would
Yeah.
say that would be my closing words.
Definitely. Well, look, I think there's some powerful lessons in there. I think what I love here so much as well is like there's such a positivity, even though around like you know some of your story, there's a lot of hardship and stuff. But it's I really feel I'm chatting to someone that's gained strength from it, and has let it define them in all the right ways, which is beautiful. Because I think that's so much of what I try to get with the podcast is, it's finding, them stories outside the norm, but really just finding that, strength through struggle, salvation sometimes through struggle.
Mm.
And just being able to reflect on it in that sort of really mature way, that's like you're able to find that strength. So, hats off to you. Look, tell all the listeners where they can find your book.
Hmm. Oh, well, you can buy my book off Amazon.
Mm.
So that would probably be
I've actually put the
the,
link in the
oh, you
description as
did.
well,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I highly
Yes.
recommend it.
Yes. And I'll send you the name of the academic book that's coming out
Please, yeah.
and the other Jewish book as well, because I think that people will be able to find value in that.
Mm.
Um, and whenever I come across a good resource, I like to share it because I believe,
Yeah,
if it's helped me, it'll help others. But just going back quickly to what you just said then, like that positivity, my favorite grandmother used to say to me, there's always somebody worse off than yourself, Claire.
yeah,
And I always kept those words top of mind because, I mean, while you're going through whatever shit you're going through, there's always somebody else worse off than yourself.
yeah,
And I think that is something because we can get drawn into that as well. We can just go, oh, poor me, this has happened, that's happened, whatever.
yeah. Not
But there's
productive.
always, yeah, there's somebody worse off than yourself.
Definitely. Well, look, wise, wise words. Look, thanks a million, Claire. Really appreciate you taking the time to jump on. Uh, your book is fascinating. I will put the link in and recommend all the listeners to go check it out. And yeah, look, thanks a million.
Oh, thank you for asking. And I was so happy to chat, really. Thank you.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Right, I
Yeah.
get you just to stick on there for 2 seconds. I'm going to stop
Hmm.
this.